All right, welcome into the Ohio State of Mind podcast. We're doing something new, episode number 13. We are on video this time. We're doing a little StreamYard. I am one of your hosts, Michael Chen. On the other side of that video, you got Josh Keatley. And obviously, Ohio State we're going to start off with the biggest news of the day, especially today. Ross Jort, and I'm probably butchering that. I want to apologize. We tried to figure out whether it was just like the singer Bjork. He got announced as the athletic director today, and my biggest takeaways is that he's coming from Texas A&M. He is obviously they had a huge contract for Jimbo Fisher, which in hindsight was not the right move. But he's inheriting a program where obviously Ryan Day is good to go. He's backing Ryan Day. Day did make some comments earlier. If you go check out Buckeyes Wire, we have posts. I got a post up there on Day's comments. He literally talked to the media for like 45 seconds. He took like 2 or 3 questions. So I think that he understands the rivalry, which I think when you look at what has happened over the last 3 years, that's huge to me. So I'm excited to see what he does, how he goes about doing his business. Gene Smith, huge shoes to fill. Gene Smith was one of the best athletic directors in the country, and he's moved on obviously, and Bjork has taken over. So it's going to be something that we're going to monitor over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, however long Bjork is here. And to be honest with you, I like it. I like what he said. The small clips that I saw, I like what he said about the football program. He's really, really invested in it. And to me, I would have liked personally Pat Chun. Washington State's athletic director at the current moment. I believe Florida Atlantic or Florida International, one of those two. I apologize to Pat. Actually, Pat was in the athletic department while I was at Ohio State in the late 90s, early 2000s. I personally, I know Pat, and I would have loved to see Pat come back, because I think that his progression of what he has done has led him to be a candidate for Ohio State. But I think that, they wanted someone who had a little bit more Power 5, big experience, and Bjork has that. And I'm very excited to see where he leads the athletic department.
That's so interesting. I guess I wasn't going to. I'm shocked that you had an opinion, a stronger opinion on the athletic director position. Some people reached out to me and they asked me about it, and I kind of said, there's a lot of. It's kind of like hiring. We can talk about NFL GMs and stuff like that. But there's so much contract and money talk that it's almost, I feel like I'm not privy or understanding all the nuances of it. So to make a snap judgment or to judge something like that is a little unfair, right? Like I feel pretty comfortable judging Ryan Day, judging Brian Hartline, right? Because I know how those things work. Athletic directors, they do so much. It's so hard to tell. So it's interesting to have you have it, to hear you have an opinion. The name you mentioned was somebody that I heard multiple times as like the favorite to get the job. So the fact that he didn't was kind of odd. A lot of people reached out to me. They asked my opinion. A lot of people gave me their opinion. The Gene Smith thing is kind of funny because I kind of was under the assumption like, oh, hey, he's a great athletic director. Everybody loves him, yada, yada, yada. But there is a portion of the fan base that disagrees with that, shockingly. And some of the reasons that they gave was, Gene Smith. Well, and some of the reasons were good. And the idea was that Gene Smith spread the athletic department too thin. As everybody knows, Ohio State and Gene Smith does pride themselves on Ohio State having the largest athletic department basically in the country. I mean, there's not a lot of schools that have synchronized swimming.
Most Olympic sports in the nation, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they got guys shooting guns and stuff like that, huh?
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, they got synchronized swimming. I think there's like 5 schools that get out scholarships for that, and Ohio State's one of them. They have their own McCorkle is for, swimming and all that, diving and all that good stuff. And not a lot of schools have that. But that's seen as a negative by some fans because that has taken away from the football team, the Ohio State team. I know you've heard it, and I've heard it many times that the Woody Hayes is not an elite football building. It's just not. You're not ranking it within the top 10. You're probably you might rank it in the top 3 of the Big Ten. But Michigan, Penn State, there's Michigan State, Nebraska. It could be arguable that those schools have better football only facilities than Ohio State. And a lot of people blame Gene Smith because he spread that money so thin. You can't, spend all that money at on the football team, which I get. I understand. I think that that's a legitimate, complaint. Another complaint was that he never really, did interviews for the football position. Now, I don't really know so much about that. I was pretty young when he, kind of kicked it off. But the idea was that he didn't really hire Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer was just kind of there and said, "Hey, I want this job." And he said, "Okay." And then the same thing for Ryan Day. Urban Meyer left and basically gave him the blessing of Ryan Day. So, he never really interviewed, right? So that's another criticism he has. Whether those are fair or unfair, I don't know. Again, I'm kind of speaking out of pocket. But the Bjork thing, I have heard more criticism about him than positive things. I'll go over some of the positives I've heard. The positives are that he is more aggressive and understanding of the NIL situation than Gene Smith was. Okay, Agreed. That's great. My understanding, and I think he even said it in his press conference, football is king, right? So there's not going to be this patty cake where the synchronized swimming is going to get money, or the shot put team, or I can't even name other teams, right? The baseball team's going to get money. No, it seems like Bjork's going to have the priority as football top notch. Now, if you're like me, that's a good thing, but I could see, if you have pride, those things, why that might be a bummer. But those are all things that Gene Smith kind of struggled with, right? Another thing is that they're saying that, a guy that has the SEC resume that he has at Texas A&M, Ole Miss, he's going to walk into the Woody Hayes and he's going to be like, rip this thing out, which is great. That's awesome, right? Because like I said, that's when you're in the day and age of recruiting, everything matters. And, Ohio State's not keeping pace, especially with Oregon, USC, Washington coming into the fold. Oregon's basically run by Nike. Better compete. Yeah. Some of the negative things I've heard is that and you kind of explained it before we started recording, and I like your take. I'm hopeful that your take is accurate, but a lot of people blame him for the worst coaching contract in college football history, which is Jimbo Fisher's. Right. They gave him an extension after he struggled. He's owed like $90 million after they fire him. So that's not ideal. Right. That's not ideal. He was also at the forefront of the Ole Miss scandal, recruiting scandal, when Hugh Freeze was there, and he was paying recruits and all that. And then he also was part of the lawsuit where Houston Nutt, because when Houston Nutt got canned, they basically blamed Houston Nutt for the recruiting violations. And Houston Nutt was like, no, it's not me. And Bjork was one of the names that was brought up as like, hey, they're using Houston as a scapegoat. So those things are negatives, obviously. But, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and act like I read all the lawyering paperwork and stuff like that. So those are the positive and negative things that I've heard. But like I said, I kind of want to sit in the passenger seat on this one, if that makes sense. But what do you think?
Yeah, it does. To be honest with you, the Jimbo Fisher thing, from everything that I've read, is the boosters were saying, hey, look, this is what we want. This is who we want. This is who we believe is going to bring the football team back. That A&M had a couple of good seasons. Let's be real here. And, Jimbo, obviously coming off of a national championship in Florida State, seemed like a good hire at the time. And he just didn't work out.
Yeah.
And one of the positives that Bjork is really kind of pushing, and you touched upon this a little bit as well, was Gene Smith's old school idea about NIL. And he really wanted people in boosters specifically to donate money to the athletic department, not necessarily to the football department. And right now, it seems like Bjork is all about football, which at Ohio State, it should be the case. That's exactly what you want to hear, right? His press conference, he talks about how, football is king, and let's be real here. At Ohio State, that is exactly it. That's what you want to hear. And I like it. I like his initial, I like where his passion is. He's already, buying into the rivalry between Michigan and, not saying their name and calling the school up north. Obviously, we'd like to not say that word, but hey, you know what? We do have to mention them occasionally here and there. So it kind of is what it is. But to be honest with you, I think that the hire, there are obviously are some negatives that you pointed out, but to me, I think that he understands the landscape a little bit better coming from the SEC. And like I said, I would have really liked Pat to get an opportunity to lead this program, but Washington State comparatively against Texas A&M, there's a huge difference there. That football is big for Washington State, but football is huge for Texas A&M. So I
Yeah.
get where the idea of getting him was. Chen was a guy that they definitely interviewed, they brought in, and they had him as a finalist. And then, obviously a couple of days ago, Bjork was the guy that, and, got announced on Tuesday, had his press conference, today on Wednesday. And to me, it's hard to say whether or not this is going to work because it's so early. We want to see
Yeah.
what his moves are going to be. What is he going to do? I think a lot of people are, dissatisfied, especially about the basketball program with Chris Holtmann. I'm big on the basketball team as well. Not just, I love Ohio State football. I love Ohio State basketball. And, the basketball team, they're in a tailspin. They're doing their New Year's tailspin like they did the year before. Chris Holtmann is coming on 3 Big Ten losses. I think it's 12 games in a row now on the road inside Big Ten play where there's no wins. That's going to be, something that he's going to put his stamp on. He's going to put his mark on. I think a lot of people as well are a little bit angered at the size of the Schottenstein Center. The shot is, when they built the shot, it was, compared to St. John's, right? When they built the shot, it was like, all right, everything's modernized. It looks beautiful, all this and that, right? I've actually had the opportunity to go to Northwestern Stadium before and after it was built. And Northwestern, I think, did a really good job. They have kind of like a Cameron feel. It's small. I think it's 4,000, 5,000 size stadium. It's really tiny comparative to what it used to be. And I think that basketball wise, we don't need 25,000 fans in there. There's no need for that. I think 10, 15, something smaller. Will he actually go ahead and do something? The Schottensteins as a family, they donate so much money to Ohio State that it's hard to envision them actually saying, well, we're just going to, we're going to get rid of it. Can they use it for other things? Yeah, sure. Great. Will Bjork make a change there and decide, hey, you know what, we want to build something a little bit smaller, a little bit more along the lines of kind of what other schools have done to give it more of that, raucous environment? Because let's be real here. For the basketball team especially, when it first started, they put the students up in the 200s and the 300 section. And that's not where the students should be. And yes, have they recently changed that? They have. But to be honest with you, I would have loved as a student, my student tickets, I was, in the nosebleed seats. And the only way I got in the court was when I joined Block O. And we're Block O's right behind one of the baskets, so you get a good view. You're right there on the court, and they have made that change. Smith realized that, hey, look, we need more students. I love the fact that it's a nice big stadium. It's modern. It's it's beautiful. When you get in the inside, it's really really nice. But you need those students down in that lower bowl. You really do. Obviously, courtside seats. You can get boosters, et cetera, et cetera. People paying a lot of money, but you want that, crazy, like, environment where you feel like the fans are just right on top of you. And that wasn't the case for multiple years of the Schottenstein Center. So it really, there's a lot on his plate because Ohio State, as you mentioned, is the largest current athletic department in the country. Will he get rid of some of these, smaller things that some schools don't do, like you mentioned, like synchronized swimming? Will he get rid of that? They've got the most Olympic sports in the country, right? And
Yeah.
And I think that was a Gene Smith thing. Gene Smith loved that, and that's something that he was passionate about. So obviously, it reflected on Ohio State's athletic department. And we'll see how New York runs the athletic department. It's going to be, it's going to take him time. He's not just going to magically do everything tomorrow. Like that's not the case.
Yeah.
So the jury's going to be out for him for a while, and people are going to be angry about it, and that's rightfully so because it's a hire that like you said, he comes with a little bit of baggage and some bad baggage, I would say. But if he does what he's supposed to do and gets this, all programs, not just the football team, not just the basketball team, if he makes changes to a lot of the programs and really gets the Ohio State brand, this is one of the biggest brands in the country. Let's be real. And if he gets that, if he gets it to work for him, then I think a lot of people will be very happy with what he ends up doing because he's got a lot of money at his disposal. But I do want to go back and touch on this NIL thing because Ohio State, as we all know, somehow, and this is shocking, they got multiple players to come back from this past year's football team, and I think you got to shout out, what's it, the 1860 Society and the Foundation. Those are the two big NIL collectives for Ohio State, and they did a great job of making sure that those players got paid to stay. Travion Henderson,
Yep.
great example. Come on, running backs have a very short shelf life in the NFL, and for them to convince him to come back, and then to add on Judkins as well. I mean, they have right now, in my eyes, they have the best 1-2 punch in the country. And it wasn't just Henderson. It was Jack Sawyer, it was JT Tuimoloau, Matt Jones, like all these dudes who probably could have gone off to the NFL ended up staying. And you have to put your hats off to the NIL and realizing that, hey, you know what, things are changing. We got to change a little bit. Because especially at the beginning of NIL, it seemed like Ohio State was kind of lagging. And we'll see how that works out in the 2025 recruiting class, which is off to a fantastic start. So we'll see. But at the current moment, the jury's still out, and the jury will be out for years to come. And we'll see what he does. But, first impressions, I'm good with it. I'm like I said, I would have rather had Pat come back. Because he understands Ohio State, he's a Buckeye himself. But going out and getting a guy from the SEC who understands the importance of college football and what it means to a program, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I'll kind of I'll agree with you on this because, like I said, I'm probably more uneducated than I should be on an athletic director and what an athletic director means to the program. But like you said, it is undeniable that football is going to be his main focus. It's very clear that that's probably why he was hired. You don't come from an SEC school like Texas A&M without focusing on football. And the Jimbo Fisher thing, that's the biggest piece of baggage. And like you said, that might not all be all his fault. That's a program that's very much run by the boosters, the oil money down there. So we'll definitely see how it works out. You brought up the NIL, the 1870 Society and the Foundation. Both those little collectives have done a great job of snagging some of these, helping snag some of these transfers and these recruits. I do want to give a shout out to, I do a lot of poo-pooing on Ryan Day and the coaching staff, but they did. It took more than NIL money to convince guys like Travion Henderson, Emeka Egbuka, and JTT to stay, because those guys, JTT was a first round grade. That he was getting mocked. You Google mock drafts from this past month. JTT's in the first round of 90%. Right. Same with Emeka Egbuka. Travion Henderson, like you said, he's a running back who was going to test extremely well, who wasn't going to fall past the third round. He just wasn't. So you're talking about there was something more than NIL there. And I think Ryan Day, probably sat those guys in a room and said, listen, this is the year. This is going to be a special, special year. So I want to applaud him for that. I really do, because I do a lot of crapping on him, and I want to make sure that I give my due diligence to, when he does something positive. And I do believe that was more than just NIL. That was him really kicking it up a notch and convincing those guys to stay.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that one, because a lot of these guys definitely could have gone off and gotten paid in the NFL and started their clock over there. And it to me, it tells you that, everyone's talking about how it's a broken program and how people don't trust Ryan Day, and he's just he's just trotting out all these dudes and just kind of doing the same thing. But yeah, like you said, Ryan Day deserves a lot of credit because it started with him, and the conversation had to start with him, right? It had to. I mean, there's NIL does play a part, right? Your NIL has to give these players a little bit of incentive to stay, especially in this day and age of college football. But Ryan Day is the beginning of those conversations, and ultimately they're coming back to play for him. They're wanting to be part of this program and continue to stay with a part of this program, get a chance to earn a pair of gold pants and a Big Ten championship and potentially a national championship. Because everything that I've seen so far is projecting Ohio State to be one of those 4 teams that's going to get a bye. I wrote an article the other day. 247 Sports has them as their 1 seed. Like it'd be shocking to me if they're not ranked 1 or 2 in the majority in the 2 preseason polls in the AP and the coaches. Them in Georgia. Georgia, I could you can give a little bit of love to Georgia due to the fact that they're returning their quarterback. They obviously Kirby Smart recruits at like a ridiculously high level, and the SEC is changing. Nick Saban gone. We'll get into Ohio State trying to poach some of those guys, and already poached one in Seth McLaughlin. So it really comes down to the conversation that Ryan Day had with his players. And you're right. You have to give kudos to him because the conversation definitely starts with him saying, hey, look, like this is what I envision for you this coming year. This is what we want. We'd love to have you back, and we'll do everything we can monetarily to do it. And the NIL, and again, it's they're working hand in hand. It has to be, he can't promise NIL and then NIL be like, well, we're short X amount of money, right? And I've seen a lot of people start donating making small donations. That doesn't have to be massive donations. I mean, for the most part, the huge boosters, they'll donate all, whatever they can and whatever they want. But regular people, $15-20, it all adds up. It all adds up. And I think that at the end of the day, like you said, Ryan Day deserves some kudos for what he did, because what he did is, I wouldn't say unprecedented, but you don't see it very. You really don't. I mean, Michigan was able to accomplish it last year. And look at they've had players leave, they've had a couple players stay, which is a little bit more normal than what you see. And for the most part, I think it was 7 out of the 10 top-ranked Ohio State players who were getting like draftable grades stayed, and that's impressive. That's really, really impressive, and that sets Ohio State up for a huge season in 2024.
Yeah, and to keep the goodwill for the Ryan Day, props going, I also want to add, I think it's great that he's looking for an offensive coordinator. There's obviously strong rumors, with a couple of different guys everybody that I've heard that has been up for the job or has been rumored to get the job has been, in my eyes, an excellent choice, except for Liam Cohen, who was the offensive coordinator at Kentucky.
But I don't think he's even like really. Honestly, I don't think he's even really a candidate anymore. I don't think so.
I hope not. But that Kentucky offense, whew, it's bad. And you can't tell me that they don't have talent. You can't tell me that they don't have talent. But our editor Phil was in the chat, was talking about, hey, Ryan Day's always been open to change, and I kind of saw that and I kind of ignored it because I'm thinking, because that has, to me, that's always been Ryan Day's biggest flaw. We've talked about it many, many, many times, whether on this podcast or in the chat, where it's like he can't call the plays. You can't do that in today's college football. It's one of the things that bury Jimbo Fisher's, that you can't call the plays, and he's refused to do that. Well, it looks like that the opposite is happening now. There's been a couple of names that have been connected to him. The one I've been seeing most prominently is Joe Brady, who's currently working on the Giants staff. But I know that the problem with some people, like Joe Brady and Brian Johnson, were 2 people that I saw that are currently in the NFL, and people are kind of poo-pooing on them because they're both with offenses that have struggled, right? The Giants and the Eagles. Well, that's not really fair. You should go back and judge those guys based off of what they did in college. Joe Brady orchestrated one of the best college offenses in college football history with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Those guys when they won the national championship with Ed Orgeron, can't even spell his last name. So to me, that's a big deal. The other guy is Brian Johnson, who we might remember him as the quarterback from Utah, but he was also the offensive coordinator at Florida the last time Florida was good and made the SEC championship game. Okay, and that was a team that was talented, but was not like we talked about with Joe Brady. So both those guys are very good choices to me. The first guy that I believe he's kind of, I haven't heard his name recently, but early on was Bill O'Brien. We talked about Bill O'Brien by accident on this podcast last week. And I think that's a great choice as well. That's the guy who brought the Penn State football team back from the brink of death, a very good recruiter, has a pro-style mindset. Remember, this is a guy that you want to find someone who's a little bit of a foil to Ryan Day's past happiness. And Bill O'Brien brings that, the guy with head coaching experience. I know he's not the sexiest candidate. At least that's what I'm hearing on Twitter. But that's a guy that brings a lot of positivity. And then Jason Candle's the last guy that I've heard of that I really enjoy, who's the head coach at Toledo. You and I on this podcast talked about how when I wanted to fire Ryan Day, by the way, I still do. That was one of the candidates I had for Ohio State's head coach was Jason Candle. Who's the head coach at Toledo, and Toledo's been rocking. They have a very good offense. They run the ball very well. DeQuan Finsman is a very fun quarterback, and they've had quarterbacks that can move and scoot and utilize. That offense has always done pretty well under him. So that's if they hire one of those guys again. Liam Cohen is the only guy I really don't like, and that's because that Kentucky outfit. I kind of already went into that, but. Those are some more positives. Ryan Day is clearly going out of his box. He doesn't want to do this, but he's trying to save his job. He's trying to make the season special, and I think he's brought in a lot of good candidates. If those are the ones that we're hearing about.
Yeah, I think that at the current moment we're gonna have to wait for the NFL. I think that's kind of where he's looking at, and I think that is kind of the blueprint right now. I hate to do this, but Michigan did it. With NFL coordinators. And that is the blueprint right now. Yep. That is what, that's what works. Guys who understand and have that the highest level of experience, and they're able to translate that. And, the college game and the NFL game are obviously different. You're going up against, not everybody on every team that you're going to play is, NFL caliber. There's only a few teams that are going to bring that. And sometimes you do need that smarter guy. You do need the guy who has experience. You do need the guy who understands how to get the job done. And I think, like you said, Ryan Day is the candidates that he has and the names that have been mentioned, the names have been connected to potentially being that co-coordinator because, Brian Hartline is there. And we expect Brian Hartline to continue to stay being there, regardless of who they're brought in. He's going to keep that coordinator position, but whoever they bring in is going to help with play call, because that's something that I mentioned on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, that I noticed that Brian Hartline is on the field. He's not in the box. He's not seeing everything that a coordinator would see. And I think that hurt him this past year. And I think that also hurts Ryan Day as well. And to bring in a guy who is going to sit in the box, who's going to see that big picture, who's going to see the 11, who is understanding of coverage is and what other teams are trying to do against them to battle that Ohio State offense. I think that's huge. So, we'll see. That's actually something that was asked on Ryan Day in his quick 40 seconds that he was available to the media today. The final question they asked him was, hey, what's going on with this offensive coordinator? And he said, he's looking everywhere, which I think is the right thing to do. They're making, a change, which I also believe is the right thing to do. And, we'll find out when it happens. He said he'll let us know when he's got any news. But I really think that, that looking to the NFL is the move. I really do. I think Jim Knowles really has, and you talked about, how Phil let us know that, Ryan Day is open to changes. Well, he realized a couple of years ago that the defense wasn't up to par. It wasn't up to Ohio State standards. So what did he do? He went out and got Jim Knowles. And Jim Knowles struggled a little bit in year one, but this past year, that defense was great. Let's be real here. Giving up 14 points in the Cotton Bowl, that should equate to a win. they got a little tired towards the end of the Michigan game. And is that on him? Maybe, but he's learning. He's getting better. And I think the progression you're seeing from year to year. I mean, they went from an average at best defense in year one of Noel's tenure to an elite defense in year two. And for me, that's the biggest thing with Ryan Day. If he's able to make that adjustment, if he's able to really get a guy as his offensive coordinator that can find a way to kind of spark this offense once again, because this past year did not look like a normal Ryan Day led offense. Like, let's be real here, it did, and it was different. But if he's able to find a guy, and you're obviously a little bit more in tune with the names that are being tossed around, but I trust Ryan Day. I don't want to fire him. I know we're in different camps here. I think that I want to give him a little bit more time, because in all reality, I was very angry at post-con, like fired up. Like, I just watching that offense score 3 points. I mean, come on, let's be
it was
real.
bad.
But it was horrendous. It was horrendous. Offensive line issues. Obviously not developing your quarterbacks who have been in. Lincoln Keenholz should have been better than what he was by the end of the year. But I do think that Ryan Day is making those adjustments, and I think he deserves the time for Bjork to give him that, to see if he's the guy. Because if not, then the next head coaching hire for Bjork is going to be the biggest head coaching hire of his career. Because I really think that Ohio State football is on a different level than Texas A&M. So, we'll see. Again, we'll see. And I like what Ryan Day is doing. I like that he's, looking off to the NFL, the next level, to get that coordinator. So, again, I'm not going to make a snap judgment until we see what an offense, the Ohio State offense, will look like next. And even in the spring game, you really can't even, say that's what the Ohio State offense is going to look like. So we'll see who he ends up hiring. And, I have some faith.
Well, yes, I have faith too. I know that we are in two different camps, but we are in the middle ground where, first of all, I understand that Ryan Day is not going to get fired right now, right? It's too late for that. I just want to make it very clear that, hey, because that's how when someone's being biased or being crazy, is when the guy I said to fire him. Now I'm sitting here talking about, he's hired his offensive coordinator, he's the smartest guy in the world. No, I want to be very clear. My stance still stays the same, but if he's back, I appreciate the fact that he understands his back is against the wall and he's making the correct changes, right? Because that's the issue. One of the reasons, and to defend myself a little bit, one of the reasons why I did want him fired is because I didn't see the same thing that like our editor, our Phil said, hey, he every time he's open to change. I didn't see that. I'm not seeing that. He's had the reason why we suck is the same reason why we've sucked since he's been the head coach. He's a dictator of the offense, right? That was the crux of the situation. It's still upsetting to me that we're in the situation where we've lost to Michigan 3. Ohio State, I keep saying we because I'm so passionate. Unfortunately, that's how I'm biased. But Ohio State has lost to Michigan 3 years in a row, and now his back is against the wall and he's going to lose his job. You shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't be in a position where you have to make a change because your back is up against the wall. That's what Jimbo Fisher did when he hired the dude. What's the guy's name that was sleeping with his secretary at Arkansas and fell off the motorcycle? Petrino?
Yeah.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Because that's what happened there. He hired that guy because he knew he was going to get fired, and he still got fired, right? But that's not a good thing, right? You shouldn't have to be forced to do something because you're going to get fired. But he's making these changes. I do appreciate that he is making these changes. I appreciate that these names that are coming up are names that he really doesn't have any connection with. They're just guys that he's looking at that have great resumes. Mm-hmm. And I do appreciate the fact that most of these guys have an extensive resume with quarterbacks as well, because he's understanding that was a weakness this past year. And he might, as a head coach, he might not have time to hold the hand of Will Howard next year. I understand that. I'm grateful for that. I'm with it, right? There's nothing I can do about it. He's not getting fired, right? So I might as well just hope for the best. I'm never going to root against Ohio State, so I want to be very clear about that. It's just my faith has dwindled my faith has dwindled in him because of these past years. But again, it's very clear he understands what's at stake, and it's very clear he understands that if he doesn't have a good year this year, he's going to lose his job, and there's not going to be any excuses. He brought back everybody. He got his pick of the litter at the quarterback position. He got his pick of the litter at the running back position. I don't want to say the pick of the litter at center, but he got a very good center in the transfer portal, right? And Jim Harbaugh, he hasn't left yet, but if he leaves, that should take Michigan down a peg. So things are lining up pretty, and Kalen DeBoer is gone from Washington. So things are lined up pretty sweet for Ryan Day to have a good 2024. But again, we'll see. But he's got no excuses this year, my friend.
No, I definitely agree with that. And, the Big Ten is changing, obviously. DeBoer going over to DeBoer, reuniting his Indiana faithful over there and in Alabama. I laugh because, one of my neighbor is actually a huge Bama fan. And, I keep telling him, like, dude, this is Indiana. They're bringing in the Indiana staff. And he's like, oh, but it's Alabama. I'm like, dude, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They've seen multiple decommits. Jamie French, who's a top wide receiver in the country, committed to Alabama, decommitted, kicking the tires with Ohio State. The report that I wrote about report that French is interested to see how Ohio State uses his buddy Jeremiah Smith this coming year. Both of them are South Florida guys. Both of them get the opportunity. Those are 3-and-out kind of guys. Those are guys that are going to play for 3 years and they're going to go off to the NFL. So I think that Alabama's loss is Ohio State's gain. It looks like it's not just going to be Ohio State's gain. I think that's something that we'll get into in just a couple minutes. But it could be Georgia's game as well, because I think hands down right now with the landscape of the SEC, Georgia's the top dog. Even though they lost the SEC championship this year, they didn't go to the college football playoff. I still think that Georgia's the top dog right now, literally. And it'll be interesting to see what goes on.
Yeah, I still think that Kalen DeBoer is, I've been talking about him on this podcast for weeks because that's who I want Ohio State to hire. I think Kalen DeBoer is a top 5 coach in college football. I think that he's not gonna have a great year his first year at Alabama. There's a mass exodus there. It's weird how the transfer portal works too, because guys from Alabama can leave, but Alabama can't pick up any guys in the portal. Right. It's very odd how they can't. Yeah, it's very weird how the situation works. I'm seeing these decommitments as well. I don't know how you watch Washington football, and if you're a wide receiver, you think, I don't want to go there, because it's like, dude, if you know what I mean? Like, that's one thing. I mean, if there's one team that had just as good, if not better, wide receivers at Ohio State, it was Washington under DeBoer.
Agreed.
And Jalen Milroe. I think Nick Saban did a really good job and Tommy Rees, I guess I give him credit too, did a really good job of hiding his deficiencies for this year. I don't think DeBoer's going to be able to do that. He does rely on his quarterback quite a bit. But I do like Kalen DeBoer. I think he's going to have Alabama right in 3 years. They're going to be in the play. They're going to be in the national championship conversation again. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I don't think there's going to be a big drop down. That guy knows what he's doing. He knows how to work the portal. He just needs a little bit of time because he's getting decimated right now. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like you said, there's a bunch of names Ohio State's going to be interested in. Caleb Downs, the safety, of course. All the reports indicate that he's going to be going to Georgia. Caden Proctor, who was offensive tackle, who's a former 5-star, and then there was another one. Help me out here. Elijah Pritchard, who was not official yet, right? But Caden Proctor was a freshman All-American this year.
Right.
Pritchard is a sophomore.
As was Downs. Both considered Ohio State. Proctor was he's an Iowa native, committed to Iowa, late flip to Alabama. And
that's right.
Right. So that there's some lure there. Obviously, Seth McLaughlin, even prior to Saban retiring, and all the reports that we saw was that they wanted to keep him, just because he literally had snap issues in the biggest game of the year. But there's and we've spoke about this before. There's talk about that his hand got injured during bowl practice, and that's why he had issues with snap. I think he's given up 1 or 2 sacks
Well,
over his time in Alabama. So again, it's that I think
yeah.
you kind of throw out the window. I think that's just a game where he had a bad game.
Well, they're also, and yeah, I believe he had a bad game. There was a couple. There were some snaps throughout the season as well. But I've talked to people that are closer to understanding the situation, and they're saying that Jalen Milroe's kind of getting away with some of that stuff, even though some of it was, the blame always goes to the center. But my understanding was that Jalen Milroe the communication was not all there. So maybe McLaughlin was taking more of the heat than deserved. And that's probably why he left. But my understanding, too, is that there's also the mass exodus for Alabama is going to continue as well because their NIL situation is so odd. I guess they're not being able to compete with Georgia, Texas A&M, Tennessee, some of these larger NIL situations. Ohio State's obviously one of those schools. I don't know if it's because before NIL, Alabama spent so much money that now they got to catch. They've been paying guys for so long, dude. I don't know if that's the issue. You can't tell me. Nick Saban is one of the best coaches of our lifetime. And I'm not gonna.
You can argue that he's the GOAT.
What I'm about to say is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's great. He's one of the best. I'm not going to argue against that, but you can't tell me that it's not somewhat ironic that NIL gets proved and all of a sudden he can't win a national championship.
Right.
It's like, huh.
Right.
Oh, that's weird. Well, and then also he's like, I don't want
to. Yeah, he was complaining about it the whole time. I think that was one of the things that pushed him out the door as well. And all the reports that you're seeing about Alabama's NIL, yes. I've seen as well that they're not paying as much as other schools are. And I think that a lot of these players said, you know what, I want to play for Nick Saban. And that's why you're seeing this mass exodus. And that's why you're seeing all these players leave. Is because you know what? I can play for just as good of a coach right now, like the same kind of coach, wherever I go, and get that money.
Well, and Saban dealt with the same thing as Pete Carroll. It's really hard. It's really hard to win when you're not the only person paying the players, right? Mm-hmm. Once everybody started paying players, his stock took a dip.
Right.
But in all seriousness, Nick Saban doesn't go. But yeah, I mean, you can't, just saying, some food for thought there. But yeah, the situation is wild. Ohio State's going to make moves on those guys. My understanding is that the Caleb Downs thing is done. That's good and buried. He's going to Georgia.
I wouldn't say this. Yeah, I mean, I think Georgia's front runner. I think that they're, I do believe that Downs is from Georgia as well. And I do think they're the front runner, but he had Ohio State in his final group, and he highly considered the Buckeyes during his recruitment out of high school. Yeah. From everything that I read, not only is he interested in playing defense, he had over 100 tackles as a true freshman. A couple, I think he had a pick, a couple forced fumbles. The dude is awesome. Not only that, he wants to return punts and kickoffs, which Ohio State has long had issues with. Having an elite guy as a returner back there would really, really help the program. And then on top of that, he wants a couple snaps on offense too. He wants the ball. He wants to play both ways. And if Ohio State can say, hey, let's do that, they've got, obviously, wasn't Ryan Day running the team when Teddy Ginn was around. But, when we talk about the best two-way players in the country over the past 20, 25 years, Ginn's in that conversation. He really is. And, I don't think that Ryan Day is opposed. I don't think Ryan Day is opposed to doing that. I think that, especially with the young players, hey, you know what? Give them 15 to 20 snaps on offense and give them the ball 3 to 4 times. I'm cool with that. I'm good with that, honestly. Like, if that's what you need to get Caleb Downs to commit, then do it. I'm good with that. The other name that you mentioned is Caden Proctor. The biggest need in my eyes is on the offense. And I think that Caden Proctor.
Yeah,
I would put if I'm making a list, and as great as Downs was, I'd put Proctor at the top of the list of those Alabama guys. Because look, you're getting another freshman All-American, a guy who's a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, played at a high level in the SEC. You don't see a lot of offensive linemen start from day one. He was a day one starter. The guy's absolutely dominant. And to be able to, to grab him and plug him in as, on either side, either tackles, and as much as, Josh Fryer and Jimmy Simmons are solid, Caden Proctor's on a different level. That guy's a first-round tackle. Fry and Simmons are not first-round tackles. Let's be real here. They're maybe day 3 guys, right? So if you could add a legit, but it's the reality of the situation, though. I know I'm being harsh, but it's real, though. What mock draft would ever predict either one of those two guys go in the first round? None of them.
I do think that Simmons showed enough improvement that with another year, I would hope that he'd enter maybe not first round conversation, but when you're talking about day 3, I would hope that he'd enter day 2 conversation. But either way, I agree with you, right? Just based off of pure need alone, even Elijah Pritchard, who also started a tackle for Alabama, would be a great addition. So yeah, I'd be down with that for sure. We got to edge it back. But it's important too, because I see a lot of these Ohio State fans clamoring for these guys, but I don't think it's a situation like we talked about with Seth McLaughlin and even Quinshon Judkins, where these guys are program changers. Like Seth McLaughlin, the need was so high to get a center in there so that Hinsman could move to his more natural position at guard.
Mm-hmm.
That it didn't matter that it was so, that position was so important, and he is such a reliable contributor that should change the trajectory of the offense. Quinshon Judkins is such a playmaker, first round talent, that should change the trajectory of the offense. As big as a need and as nice it would be for an offensive tackle addition, I guess I have more faith in Josh Simmons than you do, and I didn't think Josh Fryer was pathetic. And as far as safeties go, I mean, you got Lathan Ransom coming back,
mm-hmm.
and then you had Malik Hartford. To me,
they're freshmen, yeah.
It's not. I'm not going to be devastated if they don't get these. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I would agree, and that's exactly why I'd have Downs just a tick below the addition of Proctor, because I think that offensive line, in my eyes, is such a bigger need for this current Ohio State team. Now, if Downs wanted to come here, are you gonna say no? Come on, let's be real here. You're not. You're gonna take him. He's going to be a big-time addition to your team. But in all reality, though, to me, it's offensive linemen. We've obviously touched on Proctor, Washington offensive tackle as well, Nathan Kalipo. There's some smoke about him, ultimately, coming to Ohio State as well. I would add as much talent as you could on that offensive line, because let's be real here. Linemen get hurt. That's one of the most, physical positions in football. And you have to be deep in that position. I mean, the Cotton Bowl is a great example of the depth that Ohio State did not have this past year. They had to start Enoch Bimahi, they had to start Bimahi, who clearly was not ready. Being 3 years into the program, he was not ready. So if you can add,
which is sad,
talent. Agreed, 100%. I mean, we've already touched on that the development on the offensive line, that's why Justin Fry is a guy to me that I wouldn't mind seeing go. But regardless, just stacking talent on the offensive line. And I hate to continually go back to this, but Michigan, over the past 3 years, one of the reasons why they've kicked Ohio State's ass is because they're better on the lines. They're better. They have guys that are 100%. Just better. And Ohio State needs to continue to stack that talent, especially when you look at recruiting classes. Like Ian Moore's great, right? But he's an inside guy. And every other tackle that Ohio State has gotten over the past couple of years, they're 3-star guys. Caden Proctor is a legit 5-star dude.
Even the 4-star guys, they're not developed. I guess we'll get into that a little bit later down the road. We've talked about it a lot, but Tegra Shabola, that's a 4-star guy. Why was he not getting playing time? Yeah, we'll get whatever. We've talked about that enough. But there's the development is sad. It's less about them recruiting at a higher level because Michigan's not bringing in 5-star guards either. Zach Zinter, I don't think he was a 5-star guy. They're just developing him. And
threes and good, 3s and 4-star dudes.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, Enoch Finmahi was an USA All-American in high school.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like those, you can't develop it. He's so bad that we talk about him like he's an undrafted free agent in the NFL. You know what I mean? Like going in for the first start. That's how bad he looked. And it's like, that's a 4-star recruit.
Yeah.
That's a guy who was a heavy hitter and he looked terrible. He was a liability.
Right.
And that's awful. That's awful that I'm talking about that kid that way. But, it's just, and it's not his fault. It's not his fault. It's just not his fault. But I've rambled on about that long enough. We're getting at the 50-minute mark. You want to shut it down? You got anything else to add?
You know what? I think that we've hit everything that we want to hit today. I'm very interested to see how these portal additions happen. I do want to circle back a little bit and talk about real quick that portal window that you talked about. So it is crazy. So when a coach leaves, those players have a 30-day window in order to enter the portal. And those are the only players who can enter the portal and do that. And there's a coaches clinic a couple of weeks ago, and I read an article on ESPN that said one of the biggest, it was like the 5 biggest concerns from coaches at that clinic. 3 of them had to do with the transfer portal. 3 of them had to do with one of them was like the timing of the transfer portal. Another one was, the fact that there's 2 windows, that it's kind of unregulated, and all this stuff, and then. The amount of the amount of players being able to just transfer 8 million times. You're seeing multiple guys across the country who have been in college football for 6-7 years, and sometimes 8.
DJU, that guy's going on history. He was at Clemson, went to Oregon State. Now he's going to
Oregon
State, right?
Florida State, right? And the ability for him to continue to transfer and just play immediately. Tulia Tagovailoa got, he got his waiver denied by the NCAA. It's what kind of crappy rules is the NCAA coming around when they're allowing that? And Tagovailoa, I
have no problem. I have no problem with it.
Though. So Tagovailoa followed his brother to Alabama first, then went to Maryland, and now he's looking to go to another school. And then he was forced because he wanted to continue to play college football. Now he's forced to go to the NFL. Now, I do believe that he's a guy that will get drafted because I think he's very talented. He put up some really, really good stats while he was at Maryland. But, again, the rules of the transfer portal are just, are individual. There's no, legit set rules. And I think that to me, needs to change going forward. The NCAA needs to change that. And obviously we're, not, some of this has to do with Buckeye stuff, but it's just in general. Right? A guy shouldn't be able to transfer 8 million times and then be okay with it. Whereas and then another guy would be like, oh, well, he wants to transfer 1 more year. And then you'd say no to that. It's just, to me, there needs to be set rules. You could transfer once, and then the second transfer, you sit out a year, whatever it may be. And it doesn't matter to me, but there has to be legit rules. Everyone needs to follow it. And we just need to go on and move on and just set the standard.
Well, I think one of the bigger issues too is that COVID year really screwed everything up because, I understand. First of all, Talia Tagovailoa needed to leave. The dude's 24 years old. It's time for you to move.
Right.
These guys that are staying in college for 6-7 years, you need to move on. You need to move on. You're costing someone else a spot. You need to move on. But I understand it's the inconsistency that's upsetting because he's getting kicked out. Meanwhile, there's other dudes entering their 6th and 7th year. And I understand that. And I agree with you. But the COVID year, when they granted that COVID year, that was the dumbest thing that they could have done. First of all, most people played football during the COVID year. Second of all, that's what's really been the crux of these guys playing 5, 6, 7 years because they got the COVID year. Then they have an injury redshirt year. Then they have a redshirt year. These dudes are 25 years old, 26 years old going to the NFL draft. That ain't right. And then you got the 18-year-old sitting behind them. It's not about – I'm not so mad at the kids that are staying. I feel bad for the kids that are forced to sit the bench or they're forced to leave and enter the transfer portal because they can't get a chance to play, right? I agree with you. It's ridiculous, right? Because you're it's too much. It's too much. I believe that there is a transfer portal rule, but that's another thing too. They keep allowing these waivers because you're supposed to be able to transfer once, no penalty free. But the second time you transfer, you have to sit out a year unless you graduate. But then that's another thing, because if you want to transfer, you're just going to take all golf classes or whatever, get your degree in 3 years, and then bounce. And then if you've already graduated, you could transfer again. So you're having guys transfer, graduate in 3 years, transfer again for their 4th year, and then transfer again for their 5th year. And I believe that's what DJU was doing. I could be wrong about him, but I know that kids are doing that. And that's where it gets messy. I don't know if they want to change to where, hey, listen, you within a 4-year period transfer one time free of charge. I don't know what you can do, but the problem they're going to run into is that it's hard to get the toothpaste back in the tube, because it's these players have that freedom and they view it as that freedom. So to limit that, it makes it seem like you're taking away their freedom. Does that make sense? So I don't know how they're going to reverse course on that.
100%, and that's one of the biggest things to me that is an issue with college football right now. I wouldn't say this is the biggest issue, but it's at the top. It's near the top of the list, because things need to change. You can't look, a 6th, 7th, 8th year guy should not be playing college football anymore. Let's be real here. And
they shouldn't want to either. They shouldn't want to. They shouldn't want to.
I don't want to put an age cap on this, because you have guys who take Mormon admissions for a couple of years and come back in as 20-year-old freshmen, and
or like Joe Bowserman played professional baseball and came back.
Right. Like Chris Winkie, great examples, right? I don't want to put an age cap on this, because you've got great stories about guys who are in their in their 30s. Like there's multiple special teams kickers who come back in their 30s and get a chance to play college football again. And that's awesome. Those stories are cool as hell, right? But
but there's also a rule for that too, right? Once you start your clock, once you take your first snap of eligibility or your first play of eligibility, you're done, right? So your eligibility has started. So you have 5 years to do 4 years of athletic, or whatever the rule. There is a rule in place for those people that are in their 30s or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just, I don't know what they need to do, but I'm with you. That situation is different, and this situation needs to get solved. It's wild, man. It's wild, and I don't know who is talking to these players. Like DJU, bro, it's done. You're done. It's done. It's done. You need to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these players too, they're not talking to the right people. I know a lot of guys who get an opportunity to speak to these Ohio State athletes and let them know, hey, if you play your cards right, you'll never have to work a day in your life, right? Guys like JT Barrett signing autographs or working at, barely working at a car dealership or whatever, right? You know what I mean? And that's the power you have.
JT's a coach for the Lions right now.
Bad example. I'm sorry. Let me think of it. Let me think of another guy. Well, like a guy like Andy Groom. Andy Groom's got. I'm sure he's got a real job, but whenever he wants to, he can put it. Whatever he wants to, he can go sign autographs for $25 a pop, right? Mike Weber, Terrell Pryor, you pick, right? That's the benefit you have being a Buckeye,
right? 100%.
But if you keep transferring, and it's like that at a lot of places, Clemson, Florida State, whatever. But if you keep moving around, you miss out on that loyalty and you miss out on that brand recognition. Like Tate Martell could have sat the bench for 5 years and people would have still lined up for his autograph, right? Justin Zwick's got a radio show. Justin Zwick has a radio show. He signed an autograph. You know what I mean? You could do that because he's a loyal Buckeye. You know what I mean? But that guy, he screwed up. He went to UNLV, Miami. No one even knows who he is except for us. He screwed up.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy.
Sad.
It's absolutely crazy. And one final thought about that, the Cam Ward thing, this whole Cam Ward thing, he declares for the draft and then 2 days later he commits to Miami. It's like, what the hell is going on here? Like, who the hell told you to do that? Like, he, maybe, I don't know if it's an NIL thing. I don't know, if he's got bad, people whispering in his ear, like, dude, go.
That's 100% what it is.
Yeah, probably is. But, I don't know him very well. I don't know his camp. I don't know anybody who knows him really. But, that's the thing. It's like, you make the decision, you have to go. You decide that you want to stay, you stay. And I think that again, the NCAA needs to come out with better rules regarding transfers, regarding declarations for the NFL. I like what the NBA does. I like that they're allowing for players to declare, come back, and continue to have their eligibility, even hire an agent. You know, what's the Purdue's big man, Zach Edey, right? Like went through the NBA process last year, realized that he probably wasn't going to be a first-round pick, probably going to be a second-round pick, obviously not a guaranteed contract there, right? Ultimately came back, and now the NBA told him, hey, look, man, we like you, your size, you're big, you fit in the NBA, but you need to do X, Y, and Z better. And what did he do? In the offseason, he got better. He did those things that the NBA told him to do. And now they're talking about him being a lottery pick. Like, I like that. I wish the NFL would adopt something like that, because that gives players a little bit more leeway to say, all right, look, this job interview that you're going to take, it's not going to be the only job interview you're going to have. Because if you think about it, like when you declare, you go to the combine, you go through your private workouts, you go through the school's workouts, you know, their pro days. That's literally the biggest interview you're going to have in your life. And if you bomb it, and that's just one shot, it's like, come on, like in the real world, you get 3-4 interviews with multiple different places and you could still get a job, right? Well, athletics is just so much different. And I wish that the NBA would, like the NBA, not the NBA, the NCAA would adopt something like the NBA has, where they allow a guy to go through the process to see whether or not they actually do it. Because look, let's be real here. When you grade out, that might not necessarily be what your actual grade is. Okay.
Yes.
But if they allowed them to go through the process, go through the interviews, talk to these teams, they get a better legit feeling of where their actual standings are at the next level. And if, hey, you know what? Say Travion Henderson, like great example, right? Probably got second to third round grade right now, but maybe he tests well and people are like talking about him going to the first round. And he goes through that process. And then he says, you know what? I am going to continue with the NFL as opposed to coming back, right? It's different. It's just I wish that the NCAA again, and I know this probably we could go on this forever, but I really wish that the NCAA would make a change to that process.
I do think that the NFL, there's so many players, and it's such a weird time of the year. I don't think that you can do that. I mean, I know that these guys
change the
not
timing,
only
do you get change the timing. Then if they have to change the timing, they change the timing. Don't have the draft in April. Have the draft in February.
You could do that. I think that, you know, they don't just get their draft grades, right? Scouts do go there all year long. I mean, I've talked to a couple scouts who have said, scouts have told me that they've told specific players, don't come out, don't come out, don't come out, and they still come out. Now, I get what you're saying, where like, hey, you know, once you declare, because they're like, okay, Jalen Marshall's a great example. You know, if he left early, you know, I don't know what he got graded, but he got a grade and he did an awful job at the combine.
Sure.
Still got an NFL spot, yada, yada, yada. But if he would have come back, he would have been probably the number one gun that year.
Yeah, potentially.
Right. Mm-hmm. And who knows what would have happened. Yeah, he went undrafted. So that sucks. So a guy like that could have gone undrafted and then been like, you know what? I want to go back to school. So I do see that. But also, you know, there was a lot of people that told him not to go. You know what I mean? It's like the college has moved on. You know, if you're Brandon Ennis or Carnell Tate, you've already taken that spot. There's a lot of wheels in motion at that point in the NFL. I don't think basketball, of course, I don't know enough about basketball. That's why I don't really talk about it. But I don't know that there's as many wheels. And I also don't think that there's as many people giving you warning shots. Because that's kind of what happened to Cam Ward, too, is that people were like, dude, you're not going to get drafted. You know what I mean? You're not going to get drafted, bro. And
I mean, he'd probably get drafted, but like, how low would he go? Right? Is he a day 3 guy?
Exactly.
Is he a 4 to 7?
Oh, he's a day 3 guy.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, you know, and I'm sure people are like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you know, stay in college one more year, get a couple mil guaranteed, you know, and go have fun in Miami for a year. Like, let's be real here, right? So I don't have an issue. I don't have an issue with the window being longer. Like, you know what I mean? Like if a guy declares and like say, you know, like Cam, we're like, hey, I'm leaving. And then people are like, don't, you know, I don't know, maybe something, I don't know.
I don't understand what would have made him. With him, it was the money thing. But somehow, some way, Miami came up with enough money to convince him to come back because that was his
Right.
whole deal.
Right.
So I'm okay with extending the window when guys can come back because they have to declare that Monday after the national championship. It is a pretty quick turnaround. Maybe they want to reverse course, and I get that. I understand that a little bit. And there are a lot of warning shots in the NFL. I mean, there's just a ton of warning shots. There's just people telling you, but that's the problem. You get selective on who you want to listen to. I'm going to listen to my uncle and not the scout from the Ravens. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what gets you guys in trouble. But I see what you're saying. I don't know if there's enough. I would rather fix the portal than that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's part of, it's just something that, that's bothered me over the course of a good amount of time, like Major League Baseball changed their rules. They used to have the draft happen between, I believe it was the Super Sectionals and the College World Series, right? So like, I don't think that doing it that made a lot of sense. Now they wait until after the college season is over, which I think makes a lot more sense, right? You see guys continue to play and have an opportunity to do that. So I don't think it's out of the ordinary for a professional league to say, hey, we're going to make a little bit of change to the way our draft process goes. I think that is something that definitely could happen. But, again, it's the NCAA football it's a different monster. It really is. And things need to change in my eyes.
In those rules, some of those rules too are, I don't know. We see that. I guess that would be a deep dive for another good podcast. Maybe we could bring someone in here to distinguish some of those rules, because some of those rules are not NCAA. Some of those rules are the NFL rules.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I get it. I get it. And that's what I'm saying. The NFL has to work better with the NCAA to make it easier for these players to say, hey, you know what? You're not going to get drafted. You're not going to go to the, you're just not a guy that's going to get that first contract. And even those early contracts, it's not a lot of guaranteed money. And a lot of those guys could be stars in college and come back and make 2 to 3 times what they would make on their first contract in the NFL. So I think part of it is them getting bad information. And, some of them obviously have different situations that we don't know about, which could force their hand. But, I do think that at some point in time, that conversation needs to be had. I do think that the NCAA and the NFL need to sit down and say, hey, look, let's make this work for both parties. It can be better and get better.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that's a great topic too. I think that we should, since we're definitely doing this on camera now, we should definitely bring on an NFL agent. Just so happens I know one that was associated with Cam Ward.
Let's go.
And we could kind of maybe walk through that process, figure out why some of these guys are making the decisions that they're doing, or the decisions that they're making.
Yep, sounds good. All right, that was my last thought. Anything you got, Josh?
No, man, I'm good. Just follow me on Twitter at Josh Keatley 16. Definitely check out our work on Buckeyes Wire. We're grinding it out and monitoring the transfer portal situation. But that's it for me, my friend.
Yep, that's it for me as well. You can follow me on Mike F. Chen. Where's my camera? It's right there. And read our stuff on Buckeyes Wire. Go Bucks.